think it's absolutely urgent that the Ukraine financing pass. All the false narratives that have been out there about how we have to look after our border and we can't look after the Ukrainian border. These are all false messages. Some of them are being created by the Russians in order to try to work on the minds of the American people and to destroy our resolve. It's absolutely essential that this Ukrainian support pass. And I might say to you, Joe, that this is a failure of national leadership everywhere. We're not seeing the national leadership anywhere to completely explain to the American people the truth and how absolutely vital this war in Ukraine is to the safety of the United States of America. We're not seeing it out of the Congress. We're not seeing it out of the Senate. We're not seeing it out of the presidency. This has to happen. It has to happen, and there has to be an explanation as to why, and you have to expose some of these false rumors and myths that are being put out there to try to destroy American resolve and leadership.
Well, you say that Russia may be behind some of these rumors and myths, but are they not being propagated by certain Republicans, including the Republican frontrunner for the presidency, Donald Trump, who has the ear of Speaker Mike Johnson?
Well, I can say this. When I was the ambassador in Vienna on behalf of the United States in the Trump administration, nobody in the Trump administration ever told me to let up on the Russians. And I don't foresee that when President Trump is reelected again, that he's going to back away from NATO or back away from anybody else. I think American leadership was stronger then than it is now. But Kailey, I want to repeat my message. We're seeing a failure of leadership everywhere by everybody. The American people are entitled to know the truth. And the truth is that this is vitally important to America's safety and national security and for the future.
Well, let's get to what else should be done here. Then Governor Joe Biden has delivered a couple of speeches, one of them in prime time from the Oval Office, to speak to the dangers around the world, the risks that we face, and the need to help to fund our allies, whether it be in Ukraine, Israel, or Taiwan. We understand that there's a very different conversation that's been having in the House of Representatives. We even heard Donald Trump say a couple of weekends ago that he would let Russia, in his words, do whatever the hell it wants to our allies who don't meet spending goals in NATO. This does seem to be two different conversations, no?
I think that what the President Trump is doing is putting pressure on the NATO allies to step up to the plate. My report to you is the truth, though, which is they are stepping up to the plate, and largely because of President Trump's pressure when he was president. And I think these statements that he's making now are intended to do that. But the key point is that American leadership is necessary, and we do lead, and people look to us for leadership, and it has to happen. But right now, I think we're not seeing the proper messaging out of Washington by anybody.
Well, and that messaging or lack thereof certainly is noticed, received by our allies. Of course, we saw the Munich Security Conference happening in recent days where a lot of American allies expressed concern about the direction of the conversation here domestically, what it could mean for the future of alliances, the future of U.S. participation and support for allies in Europe. What should they be thinking of the United States at this moment? Are their concerns not founded in real threat?
Listen, the real threat is certainly there. This is a Russian fascist dictatorship that is committing aggression. I have to talk about Navalny for a second. This is a murder of Putin's principal leader. Whether he was frozen to death in the Arctic gradually and starved to death or submitted to illness, or whether he was directly accelerated in a murder through some type of activity up there in that remote place. That's an important message to the people of Russia, to the people of Europe, and it ought to be an important message to the people of the United States, that this is what's in our future if we don't step up and do something right now. But you're right about this, that the messaging, I think, needs to be strong. Our European allies, I worked with them every day while I was in Vienna on behalf of the United States. Their best interest for their citizens all across Europe is to follow American leadership. If American leadership falters, they will do the best they can for their citizens, just like we do for our citizens. And that means that there's risk up the road that they'll compromise. We can't allow that to happen. Russia cannot succeed in this attempted conquest and subjugation of Ukraine, trying to reassemble the Russian Empire. If he does that, he threatens Europe And eventually, that threatens the United States of America.
Would it have helped, Governor, if Donald Trump, the former president, in his statement about the death of Alexei Navalny, had in fact condemned Vladimir Putin? It didn't even mention his name.
Well, I'm certainly doing it. I mean, I think that right now that all of our national leadership needs to be as vigorous and strong on this as possible and explode some of these myths. Listen, we have a right to know that the money that taxpayers send to Ukraine is being properly spent. And that means that that information has to be shared. The Zelensky administration has to be at pains to get that information to the American taxpayer if he wants taxpayer money. It means that the national leadership from the White House has got to be explicit about addressing these issues. You have to explain that the American border is important, but it's really a different issue from Russian aggression in Europe. America's a great power. We can do all of these things appropriately, but it requires leadership both internationally and here in the United States.